Hey there. So in the first two videos, I assumed absolutely no music theory knowledge, and we built up a little bit, so let me recap briefly. So we decided that a 6th fret jump sounded evil. And that's a tritone, right? It's a distance of 6 semitones. We also pointed out that if you move up 12, that's actually the same note again. So we have a kind of 0, 6, 12. It's like a clock face, right? We took all the available 12 notes and we cut it in half. We have a root note and the 1/6 higher. Then, across the course of the first video, we explored cutting that further. So into 0, 3, 6, 9, 12. So all the notes that you would use would be 3 frets apart. And this is called diminished 7 arpeggio. Then, in the second video, we looked at what happens if you build a more interesting scale out of those, adding the note that's either 1 semitone higher than all those notes, or 2 semitones higher than those notes. And that was the basis of the second video. So in this video, we're going to look at another way you can make sure you get all those good diminished 7 arpeggio notes, which is simply to use all the notes, right? And because it's all the notes, like all the color of the rainbow, we call it the chromatic scale, chroma for color. So obviously you already know you can play whatever notes you want. So telling you, hey, you can play all the notes and sound like Meshuggah isn't super helpful. So I'm going to be looking at a few strategies you can use that are more Meshuggah-esque. So one thing that might work quite well is if you took riffs that were based around the same diminished scales from the second video, that's the half whole and whole half diminished scales, and you just filled in the gaps with the notes on the frets in between if it fit the groove. So maybe something like those notes there from the half whole diminished scale, maybe you just fill them in. You could move up 3 frets, like the riffs we discussed in the first video, and maybe you could ascend from there. So let's see what that would sound like. So that's a pretty basic way of constructing riffs, but it definitely works. So another one that I quite like is the intro to Monstrocity. So we looked at riffs that just descended chromatically and ascended chromatically. But the intro riff to Monstrocity does something interesting, where it kind of starts in the middle and it kind of grows on either side. So it starts on the 4th fret and then slowly adds until it's all the way down to the 1st fret, all the way up to the 7th, and then it kind of starts again. So it's a kind of chromatic riff, but it starts in the middle and it goes up and down from there. Also, I literally just noticed that this riff is based on that moving 3 frets kind of thing that we discussed in the first video, in that it starts on the 4th fret and then it moves up to the 7th and down to the 1st, and that's what the riff's all based on. So yeah, I missed that, and I'm sure I've missed lots of other interesting things about these riffs. So far we've looked at chromatic riffs as being ones where you mostly move by 1 fret at a time. But we can use all the notes in whatever way we like. So we might prefer to do some large jumps. So the simplest form of large jump to incorporate in a riff is what's called an octave displacement. So it's where you take one of the notes and you move it up 12 semitones or 12 frets, and that's all you need to do. It's the same note, so it's going to sound good, and it can introduce a bit of interest. So here's a Meshuggah riff that does a really simple piece of octave displacement. So we've looked at chromatic riffs where the idea is that you move one fret at a time. So that's descending or ascending in steps of one fret. We've also looked at octave displacement, which is where you take a note and you move it up 12 frets. It's the same note, and it introduces a bit of melodic interest. So what if we combine those two approaches? Well, if you move down a fret and then up 12, so you octave displace the second note, you get what's called a major seventh interval. So this is the same as moving up 11. So -1 plus 12, 11. So you guess what the other one probably is now. So if we move up one fret and then 12 frets, we get what's called a minor ninth, or a jump of 13 semitones. It's good and evil sounding. So yeah, there's lots of really good Meshuggah riffs that are mostly based around major sevenths or minor ninths. So now, to conclude the lesson, I'd like to discuss a riff that is my personal favourite Meshuggah chromatic riff, but it also contains all the things we've just discussed. So it's got leaps, all of major sevenths, or 11 fret leaps, and it's all about descending semitones as well, until we get down to the root note. So this is the breakdown riff from I Am Colossus. So obviously this riff is not particularly easy, but it still breaks down into the same simple ideas that we've been discussing so far in this lesson. So apart from an initial group of 3 notes, it's broken down into a repeating pattern of 5 notes, 4 notes, 2 notes, 4 notes. So that kind of rhythm. And that repeats across the bar line in standard Meshuggah form. Then, each group of notes always starts with a major seventh leap, that sound that we discussed when we were talking about leaps. And then, all the other notes descend by 1 fret. Finally, when you run out of notes, go back up and start again. So, the first time the riff starts on the 9th fret, the second time it starts from the 8th fret, then it goes back to the 9th fret, then back to the 8th fret, and then you're done. Finally, it ends on our old friend, the tritone from our very first lesson. So that brings things around neatly, and I think that's where I'm going to stop discussing the Meshuggah riffs and maybe look more at solos and the kind of background atmospheric effects. Thank you very much for watching these through. I've had a really good time making them.